Teachers of Reddit, what's some behind the scenes drama you had to hide from your students? Had to create a throwaway for this one. Here it goes. I f***ing hate the middle school math teacher on my team. She is the most vapid, self-absorbed BTCH ever. She's loud and obnoxious. She is generally disliked by everybody on our team and in our school. She has a few friends at work. I don't know how they tolerate her. I'm sure a lot of them put up with her because they don't want to deal with her attitude. The tension in our team meetings is palpable. You can tell every time she opens her mouth. The rest of us just want her to shut up. I'm pretty sure she's getting switched with another math teacher next year. So, here's the thing. None of the kids know that the rest of us can't stand her. They think we all get along just fine. And if she does get moved next year, we will tell the kids that it's because the school thought she would be better as a high school teacher. She's not a bad teacher or anything. She's just obnoxious. We've dealt with her for 5 years. It's time for someone else to have their turn. Probably going to get buried. But I lecture at a university as a side job to my profession. 2 classes or so per semester. So, right before the winter semester my father passed away suddenly while playing tennis. He was 65. I was 28 at the time. And I will never forget how hard it was to teach. Not only teach but be engaging, humorous and passionate about my subject. Behind my eyes, I was crippled with depression. It took me until this past year to get over that hump. May not seem like a lot given the stories here, but I was surprised I made it through the semester. Then the year. Then the following year. I have never before had to put on an empty smile so hard in my life. But end of the day it is a job. A job I am paid to do. It is a job I happen to love. Kind of a teacher. I'm an instructor for people with special needs. One of our people, a younger man who lived with his parents, was taken to his basement and shot by his mother, who then turned the gun on herself. A lot of our folks just plain wouldn't have handled the truth well. Would have been upset. Or frightened. And truthfully, may never have understood or come to terms with the fact that sometimes horrible things happen to the most innocent of people. We ended up telling those ones that he simply passed away. That I agree with them when they tell me they think a teacher is weird or creepy. Yeah. I think so too. Everyone hated one teacher at my school. Especially the other teachers. I always suspected it based on the way they talked about her. But when I became friends with one of my teachers, he outright confirmed that every person in the school was actively trying to fire this one awful teacher. We had a teacher like that. Expect she got respect for teaching for 30+ years. And she got pity points for losing some use of a leg in a car accident. But she was a total BTCH and everyone thought it. I guess this is semi-relevant. But I used to buy weed from and get high with an elementary school teacher. She was a great teacher. Always working on lesson plans and grading papers. She just liked to unwind and relax. She is a single mother of 2 kids with a mortgage and teacher's salary couldn't afford to buy weed. So she sold it to get free weed. Also, her kid's father was shot and killed a couple years ago during winter break. She said it was hard for her teach. Her class had no idea. She moved 1,500 miles away to get away from all the drama and go on with her life. My 7th grade science teacher, who really propelled me on my life course of becoming a science teacher, was gay. Unfortunately. She worked and I attended a small Catholic K-8 school. She loved Xena Warrior Princess. We saw her around our small town with her best friend. Always with her best friend. All the other teachers at this small school must have known. But it would have been scandalous if the parents found out or if she ever dared to share with us who she was as a person. One day she cried because a kid had written homophobic things about another kid on a bathroom stall. I mean full on bald. I'll never forget sitting there in class and just searching in my head as to why she would react in this way. In hindsight I can't imagine what she was going through not being able to share who was. Older me just wants to go back in time and hug her to tell her it will be alright. Younger me didn't quite comprehend the scope of pain she must have felt. I had an amazing art teacher through 3rd grade to my senior year, very small rural school, who kindled an ongoing passion for art in me. I knew this lady better than I know a lot of my own family. She seriously took an interest in me and a lot of other troubled kids and helped us find an outlet. When I was about 15, her son died. He was a pilot in training in the USAF and crashed during a training flight due to mechanical error, killing him and the instructor. She was gone from class for a month, and when she returned you could hardly tell she was upset at all. A couple days later, I was going to clean my brushes off before leaving and she was there, scrubbing the other students' brushes off when she just dropped all of them and braced herself on the sink. I asked what was wrong, and she said, "It just hits me sometimes. You know? This super strong, happy woman was getting ready to cry, and I couldn't have handled it. So I hugged her and told her it was okay, that she'd get through it. And that's what MRS. Robbins truly did for me. The feeling I got from hugging her and telling her everything would be okay when I knew she was dying inside is the best feeling I've ever had in my life. Because she smiled, wiped her eyes, and carried on like her son would have wanted. I felt like I made a difference in her life. And that feeling of empathy and compassion has been with me since. Thanks, MRS. Robbins." I grew up in a pretty small town. One where everyone knows everyone and their dog's business, so it's hard for anything to be kept quiet. Our middle school principal, when I was a student, who was always such a level-headed and nice guy, called the entire school into the assembly hall late one year and made us sit there while he dropped the school's entire collection of calculators out of a box onto the floor and proceeded to kick them around the floor, yelling at us for being so destructive with them and costing the school so much money. I remember the other teachers sitting behind him bugging their eyes out but not saying anything at all. That was the beginning of a lot of outbursts. Some aimed at students, some at teachers, some at the entire school. We went off for summer break and when we came back we were informed he'd died of a massive brain hemorrhage. Turns out he had a nasty brain tumor that he'd hidden from the entire faculty that had caused the huge change in his personality. My IT teacher from high school approached me once while I was taking parts inventory for one of his classes since I was his TA, to ask me how to stay positive when a family member has cancer. Backstory. 2 months prior to my senior year, my teacher's daughter had gotten leukemia and was in really bad shape. Now, this teacher always has a happy attitude and loves teaching IT, and this event really brought him down. Anyways, I explained to him that everything was going to be alright and that his daughter was well taken care of by the professionals at UMC here in Tucson. Hell, if they were able to get Gabrielle Giffords back on her feet after the shooting, they can help his daughter get through her leukemia. What started out as advice turned out to be a pep talk in which he relayed to his daughter, ultimately giving her the persistence to fight her cancer. She's been cancer-free since fall 2013. TLDR gave the teacher a pep talk on how to deal with a loved one that was stricken with cancer. I became friends with the teacher, and after I graduated high school and there was no conflict of interest, he invited me to his birthday the following year. Of course there were heaps of my old teachers and some new ones from lower year levels I'd never seen before. One of the new ones was talking about how scared one girl made her, because she wrote a really detailed creative writing story about a girl with serious mental problems and what it's like. She gave quotes, and basically said that now she's read this, a ton of the girl's behavior in class makes sense. At the time I was about 90% sure I knew who she was talking about. So that was really weird and kinda creepy. Hope the teacher talked to her about it. Or something. How short we are on money. The school I work at is very strict about paper, for example. So when my students complain about having front and back pages, I pretend that I have some green vibe in me. Plus what happens in the teacher's lounge. If they knew how childish some of my colleagues are, they'd lose any trace respect that might have had before. My school never hid anything. School 1, where I went for middle school, built a $500 000 football field. Twice. Almost immediately after one another. School 2. My high school. Auctioned off building to the cheapest bidder. The roof was FK'd. Hey, spent $2 million to begin with. And then $2 million more for a new one. Funny thing is, both of these schools are in rural f***ing nowhere, Ohio. Joining to the not a teacher. But. : Once upon a time my friend's classmate had to leave the classroom a little earlier after the school supervisor spoke profanity with the teacher. Of course her classmates started to laugh and say jokes about that girl did something wrong to be punished and laughing at the situation. But all lasted until the teacher had enough and angrily dropped the info. The girl's father killed her mother and siblings. Being she the one survivor for being in school at that time. All the class, including my friend, started to cry and feel like shit. And yes, the murder was even on TV news. : Capital C. 1. Turns out one of the teacher's coaches and his wife are nudists and all those summer trips were to a nudist colony. A student was doing door-to-door fundraising. Rang the bell. He answered in the nude. She spread the word at school. 2. A paid teacher was cheating on her husband, another teacher at the school, with the boys' soccer coach. 3. The APU's history teacher and biology teacher were in the midst of a divorce. She had already gone back to using her maiden name, so not many students were aware when they referred to their slutty ex-wife or asshole ex-husband that they were, in fact, referring to the teacher 4 doors down the hall. Not a teacher, however, my dad was the guidance counselor, small school. He was number 3 in the administration pecking order, and the local teachers union president. Heard way too much about a lot of things involving staff and parents, divorces, affairs, CPS cases, turf wars, etc. At one point I knew my best friend's parents were getting a divorce before he did. That was tough for me. The toughest for my dad, I think, was having to tell a kid that his twin sister had gotten into a car accident on the way to school and passed. Most memorable drama though would have to have been that one of our superintendents, who seemed fantastic in most respects, but a bit aloof with the students, was actually an emotional basket case who regularly broke down in staff meetings and had the entire staff on edge for the better part of 3 years and caused the school to be quite dysfunctional. We missed out on a lot of grant money because of her. Overall, having that kind of insight and knowledge of stuff made me very cognizant of the fact that everyone has burdens and is fighting a personal battle of some sort, despite appearances to the contrary. Not teacher. Mom was administrator at the school I went to. Most days. Because she worked late. Every night I would just chill in the computer lab. Hitting up miniclip like a mofo. So I'm there one night. And I look over my shoulder. And I see my teacher talking to the head teacher. Think nothing of it, of course. It was my teacher's first year at the school. And it was pretty clear to everyone there that she had no f***ing clue what she was doing. Couldn't handle the class. Nor did she know the subject matter. Next morning, head teacher has a meeting with us that our teacher has been fired. And that the teacher we had last year, who was currently on a 2-year trip in New Zealand surfing, was coming back. TLDR, I watched my teacher get fired. I caught a girl snorting coke from the bathroom counter. Also, I teach some students with severe autism. One of the things we do is wait until the halls are empty to walk them, simply because they are so violent. We wear Kevlar PPE. There are only 4 of them. And most kids don't even know they are at the school. What sets them off to be so violent? Do they actually bring weapons, or are the Kevlars for things like sharpened pencils? And finally, why is this happening at a public school? Shouldn't they have their own facilities? I don't mean to sound ignorant, I am genuinely interested. Not teacher. Daddies. Works with special ed students. Bitchy teacher was literally throwing cups at kids for snack time. My dad got real pissed. Took her outside. Scolded her for acting like a terrible person. Then went to his boss and informed her about the incident. He had to take over the class while the teacher got called up. Our favorite teacher who taught home ec. Cooking was the headmaster's wife. She woman taught up until last Christmas. Then took a week's leave before we broke up for the holidays. Come January. Back in school. We find out she died. She had cancer for half a year and we never knew. The whole school was a bit shaken. Was going to make a joke about your sentence stating with she woman instead of the woman, but I got to the end of the story and it sounds like an appropriate title. I want to answer on behalf of my 11th grade English teacher who was going through a divorce and a custody battle for his 4-year-old daughter during the time he spent teaching us. Some days it was very apparent that something was really eating away at him. This teacher had a very distinct personality. You could tell when he was off. I'm sure it was an immensely difficult time for him. Especially because he continued to teach us in what was one of the more memorable classes I've ever taken. I didn't find out the details of what was going on until after I graduated and he left the school. That reminds me of a teacher I had in high school. For like 6 months we knew something was up with him. Then one day the rest of class had to go to a career or college expo thing I had already been to earlier in the day. It's just me and this old teacher in the classroom. He comes and sits near me and says, "Hey, your parents aren't married, right? What was that like for you growing up?" Turns out, he had been fighting his wife for 6 months to not lose all custody of his son. Reminds me of my English teacher last year who would tell us anything. Really anything and then just go, but you didn't hear it from me. This is how we heard the story of the pregnant girl who left for a few months and the history teacher who broke up with her boyfriend because he smoked too much weed. Would have wondered what she said about me if I weren't so boring. I had a teacher like that. But she didn't say any of that stuff until the last day of our senior year in high school. Most people stayed home. We went in. Had this long, enjoyable conversation with the hot young French teacher about weird Japanese tentacle porn and her clit ring. To be young again. I was having dinner with my co-workers yesterday and one of their sisters came. She's a teacher. Apparently a kid at her school committed suicide recently. And she or any other of the staff aren't allowed to talk about it. The kids all think he just died in his sleep. She was saying she was trying not to cry all day at work. That's awful to keep that from the students. We had a girl commit suicide in our senior year that a lot of us, including myself, were close to. I'd be furious if I was lied to about what happened. My mother was an office administrator at a subunit of our high school. My 10th grade year. They had to stop telling teachers when fire drills would be. There was an actual, small, very manageable, fire in the cooking class thanks to a grilled cheese sandwich. Most of the students were evacuated correctly. But lots of teachers figured that since it wasn't a scheduled drill, it was just a test. The fire department tested the alarm every month, or an alarm malfunction. So, they kept the kids in the room. Another office admin had to come over the intercom and announce teachers. Since there is very obviously a fire alarm going off, please evacuate the building as per your drill instructions. Double quote. Edit. The teachers got in huge trouble. No one was hurt. And the girl didn't burn her next grilled cheese. I fought for 3 months to keep my job. Thanks to a crazy incompetent principal and a power-hungry department chair. They would demand that I change a lesson plan immediately before class. Then randomly observe and ask why I wasn't better prepared. The best example. My principal demanded that I stop showing movies in my class. The twist? IT was a film studies elective. My students were taken aback by the fact that we were suddenly reading Frankenstein in film studies one day. And I couldn't tell them it's because their head principal literally said, "I don't believe there is such a thing as a great movie." Double quote. Planning the music department spring trip is by far the most drama that I have to hide from my students. We started planning this back in August. And we still have no information to hand out to students. We have to get 3 bids from companies that are approved by the county. Then submit them with a 30-page field trip packet since it's for an overnight trip. And then have them reviewed for about 4 weeks. Each music teacher in the department got a separate bid back at the beginning of October. And one teacher volunteered to turn them in. This teacher did not turn them in until mid-December. This has delayed the entire process. I can't tell the students that the reason we're delayed is because the other teacher hung on to all the bids, even after I repeatedly asked if I could turn them in. This has caused tension between all the teachers in the department. Our department chair, finance person, and administration. I am hoping at this point that we are still able to go. It was close to the end of the school year in 1994. And I was in a special ed class. It was 2nd grade. My teacher was the nicest and most kindest person I'd ever had for a teacher. Since it being the end of the school year, we weren't doing any schoolwork but just watching movies and whatnot. Someone brought that movie Cool Runnings on VHS. When it got to the end of the movie, I noticed the teacher was getting real emotional and started crying because the Cool Running guys crashed their toboggan but still managed to cross the finish line. Next thing you know, half the class is crying because the teacher was crying. It was one of the most surrealist moments I'd ever experienced in a classroom. Very emotional for everyone. One of my favorite teachers. And I'll never forget her. At my elementary school the summer before I entered 3rd grade, my principal and vice principal were both fired. The principal had stolen $20,000 from the district so she could buy herself shoes and stuff. I heard she had some sort of mental problem that made her need to buy clothes and stuff, I guess. She was arrested and I don't know what happened to her. I think she was locked up for some time though. My vice principal, that same summer, was busted for being an escort. Her fake name was Tara Taylor and she had a website and everything. I believe she was just fired but did not face legal problems. Turned out they turned each other in as they both knew what the other person was doing. Keep in mind, these were K5 principals. I get this is late, but I have a relevant story so I jaff. Not a teacher, but at my intermediate school our principal was married to the art teacher. And about halfway through the year the entire school eventually found out that the principal was screwing the music teacher. Everybody, even the art teacher, knew by the end of the year and the principal was sacked. Nobody missed him. He did a rubbish job of running the school, which has massively improved since the new principal arrived. Turns out that the dude was apparently spending a good deal of the school budget on staff offices in the staff room. Wouldn't be surprised to learn if some of it was going into his back pocket either. Close bracket. I'm not a teacher but my 3rd grade teacher told us she was pregnant. She didn't show up to school for like a week. We thought it was because she was on maternity leave but then the social workers at the elementary school ended up telling us that she had a miscarriage and that it was the 2nd time it happened. Of course us being in 3rd grade didn't fully understand it but when she came back to school you could see the sadness in her. At one point she broke down during class and started crying. Honestly I didn't realize how horrible it must have been for her. And now that I think about it I hope that she was able to finally get the child that she always wanted. When I was in 11th grade my Latin teacher went to England for the December break. Apparently she had been talking to this man for hours every lunch break she had for years. This guy she was talking to was part of her wedding. She left her husband and moved to England over the break to marry this other guy. Her ex-husband then came into our class and explained everything and was crying and shit. It was very f***ed up. I am not a teacher, but a student. In 3rd grade, I had a teacher who was nice, but some days would get super angry for no real reason. We were well-behaved students, so it was odd that she would be upset. She always drank yellow liquid out of an airtight bottle, but no one questioned it, because we thought it was apple juice. Towards the end of the school year, she left abruptly and was replaced by a student teacher. We were all very confused. I later found out from someone at the head of the PTA that she was drinking in class. Looking back, it made sense now why she would chew so much mint gum. A lot of times when you have disturbed students you have to keep it kind of hidden. I have a 6th grader who is only allowed to write with colored pencils and can only use the teacher's sharpener due to stabbing himself and cutting himself. He also has to have a male adult aide go to the bathroom with him. He has 2 minutes to pee and if he isn't done, he has to come out and show the aide his arms then go back for 2 more minutes. Very difficult to keep those things from other kids. I substitute for special ed classes and I'll often watch over one of my students in a mainstream class. Some mainstream teachers aren't very kind and will make jokes about the students right in front of them. As if the students are too stupid to realize they're being made fun of. As a substitute, I'd never feel comfortable calling the teacher out. And I don't ever get time with the teachers without the students there. I usually just ignore their comment. And if my student asks to clarify what the teacher said, I'll make it sound like we were discussing something they'd have no interest in, or they referenced something the kid wouldn't get or something. In high school I had a male teacher who left halfway through the year. I didn't learn until after I graduated that he had been fired due to claims of sexual harassment by a freshman girl. The kicker? Years later she admitted that she had only accused him as revenge for a bad test grade. He was a well-liked teacher, but to my knowledge has not been able to find a teaching job since. However, I believe he received some money from the school and the court that convicted him on little to no evidence. I would like to tell a short story about my science teacher in high school. She was a tough woman that served in some form in the Korean War. Well, one day she found out that her son committed suicide. She came back to teach a week after and showed no sign of sadness while teaching. She was a huge BTCH and was one of those people that tell people, "Why are you sad? You have it better than most people in this world." As ignorant as that statement is, it holds a lot of truth to it, especially knowing that she has seen some shit. But I will always respect her. The teacher that molested kids didn't come out till I was in 5th grade, but when it did, women from college and above were coming out of the woodwork to say he had molested them, and no one believed them or the school covered it up. Reading the court transcripts, the allegations were true and the school had known about it since the 90s but never really did anything to stop him. From what I've heard from parents and teachers, when kids in 4th grade were evaluated, they would give him 80% boys, 20% girls. And the girls were typically the smallest and least developed in the grade. However, a lot can change over the summer between 4th and 5th grade or even during the year. Inevitably one girl would be chosen and he would molest her throughout the school year. Kai's classroom was designed to allow him maximum discrepancy. All the teachers knew and talked about it. He was the only male black teacher and the white female staff, which contributed largely to him getting away with it. This will probably get buried, but what the hell. I'm not a teacher. But I will answer on behalf of one of my high school math teachers. She was an extremely androgynous woman. And everyone assumed she was gay. Somehow I knew she wasn't. She had gotten married earlier that year. And showed us pictures of her wedding. In all the pictures she showed us, the other bridegroom was never present. That year, I lost my shit in her class because my mom was in the hospital and very close to death. She dismissed class 20 minutes early and we had a heart-to-heart. She sobbed as she confided in me that her mom had died of brain cancer just a few weeks ago. And that her husband died when the chemical factory he was working in exploded just a few weeks after they were married. This woman taught every single class with a smile. My ex-husband called me 5 minutes before my first class of 2nd graders came in for art to tell me he was leaving me and moving out of our place as we spoke on the phone. Somehow I was able to not completely break down. I hung up the phone, accepted the class probably white in the face from shock, and then called the office and asked for a sub. The secretary was great and kept the secret from everyone. She told the sub I was really sick. One little girl was particularly smelly. Her dad seemed nice enough during conferences, but we knew they were extremely poor. She was in 4th grade and all the other kids were starting to use deodorant and whatnot, thinking they couldn't afford it. The teachers pitched in and helped me buy her a little kit of personal hygiene items. Bottle of shampoo, deodorant, etc. We try to give it to her and she declines. Long story short, she ends up telling the counselor that she doesn't shower in hopes that it will repulse her father and he won't touch her anymore. I cannot even. Obviously. It was reported and investigated shortly after. Teachers are so devoted to their students. For those 9 months, they are basically our kids. Every year, there's at least one kid that you just want to hug forever and would do anything to make sure their life ends up okay. I can't believe caregiver burnout isn't more prevalent. Not a teacher, but I did witness some unfortunate events befall a student at the incompetence of the upper faculty. We had a student in my middle school who one day we discovered wore a wig. When it was ripped from her head during lunch period, it turns out she had been pulling out and eating her own hair for the better part of a year. Hence the wig. Now what should have happened was the student who pulled off the wig should have been punished while the parents of the girl should have been contacted. Neither of which happened. The VP of our school instead spent the next 3 hours parading her from room to room, having her speak in front of every class about how she pulls her hair out when she gets stressed. The big thing that the VP didn't know as he walked her from class to class was why she was so stressed. She had been raped by a family member. An immediate family member. The worst part of all of this was she ended up having to transfer schools because instead of ending at the knowledge that she wore a wig, the VP gave a whole class of 7th graders the knowledge of what happened to her hair. So many of them were merciless and harassed her daily. I couldn't imagine going through what she did. It was just awful. Only story I have is sort of boring, but I'll share it anyway. Not a teacher, but I was always fairly close to my high school and college teachers. After I graduated high school, my band teacher would always have alumni come play in the winter concert and get dessert after to catch up and what have you. Well, about 3 years ago he was on the verge of being fired because the board was cutting funding to the arts programs. Every single one of his students, including me, wrote a letter to the board explaining why they should keep him. That winter concert, he was doing his little speech at the beginning, and when he got to the possibility of leaving the school, we all started chanting his name. He started crying on stage from all the support. His wife later told us that he had to read the copies he got of the letters in chunks because he would keep getting emotional. He still teaches music. Edit because spelling is hard apparently. This will probably get buried, but I'll throw it out anyway. My dad is an oncologist. When I first started high school, some teachers had already heard about me, which I thought was funny since I never knew anyone that had been there before. When I told my parents about this, my dad shrugged it off and said he knew a guy. Fast forward to my sophomore year. One of the English teachers died after a long bout with cancer that none of the students were aware of. He was a well-loved teacher, and it shook the student body up quite a bit. When I told my dad this, he said, "I know. I was with him last night when he died." Turns out my dad was his oncologist for years. I had never really put it together in my head, but now it made sense. That's how my teachers all knew me when I first started. I can only imagine what it was like for the staff who knew to keep that from the students, especially near the end. I doubt this'll get seen, but I found my drama teacher's cocaine with my humanities teacher. Ian, fake name. My humanities teacher got a call from my drama teacher, John, fake, to go and get bags of makeup for him from his office, closet sized with tons of dresses, costumes, and bags in it. He directed 10 plus performances per year. In class we were working on a writing assignment and I was the only one obviously not working. So Ian pulled me out to go find makeup. After finding a couple bags, I came across one that had a big beat up Altoids container in it. And as I was reaching down to grab it, I told Ian there's a 50/50 chance this has drugs in it. Lo and behold, there were 5 or 6 tiny bags that had remnants of white powder in it. Ian just licked his pinky, stuck it in one of the bags and then tasted it, shaking his head saying it wasn't cocaine, and we carried on packing stuff up. The next day Ian pulled me out of my first period class, and on the way to his classroom I said, "It was cocaine, wasn't it?" He said it was, but that now he doesn't know what to do and that I seriously need to keep quiet while he figures out what to do. John is the son of the principal and art teacher. Meanwhile Ian was a new teacher that year. Close bracket. I'm really not sure what ended up happening though. This was ages ago. In the early 90s. I lived in a smallish conservative town in California. The math teacher, who I'll call MR X, was beloved by everyone. Sweetest guy ever. Summer between sophomore and junior year MR. X became Ms. X and casually started classes in September with little or no explanation. Ms. X said she wasn't allowed to discuss any details. So we took it at face value and continued to love her. Within the first week of school though, a bunch of parents had contacted papers and the school board. The second week of school we had a sub. No one would tell us what was going on, but you can tell everyone was upset. The third week of school the principal called an assembly of the entire school saying that against her wishes and every other teacher's wishes, Ms. X had been asked to resign by the PTA and school board. Now that I'm older, I think the principal knew what she was doing and basically said F this shit. The students went insane at the announcement. We practically rioted, peaceful protests and no homework being done. The entire third week was spent in chaos of teenage protest, being interviewed by the paper, and causing a ruckus. As much of a ruckus as a bunch of early 90s small CA town kids can cause. The government teachers helped us organize, and the literature, English and art teachers let us use their class time and supplies to make our protest signs lol. Monday morning of week 4 Ms. X was back in class. She's still teaching there. And from what I hear she is still very much loved. College instructor here. Some typical stuff. There are always gossipy faculty who talk shit about staff and students. Tenured professor so and so with multiple degrees and accolades is really racist. Your adjunct professors are highly qualified, experienced, and caring, mostly. Yeah. They earn less than 15k per year. The most absurd thing occurred a few years back. The internet was down for several days on the entire campus. IT Dept couldn't figure it out. The main modem router device was broken. They had to call AT&T and wait 2 days for a replacement. I'm a student that got some details of a crazy incident from my former teacher. So we're in class doing our work like normal and my teacher, let's call him MR. B is just sitting at his desk doing teacher things. Our school was pretty big. 2 stories. And had 2 long hallways filled with classrooms. So we're all just working talking when suddenly we all hear some yelling in the distance. Not common for our school. Then loud footsteps. Almost stomping. As he races past our room. MR. B gets up and chases after him like a bat out of hell. I don't know how we all remained seated. But a good 5 minutes later MR. B comes back and with the sternest voice I've ever heard from him say, "You have work to do. Sit down, shut up and finish it." And so we did. A few months pass and I'm talking to MR. B. I have a closer relationship to him than most students, and we start talking about what happened. Apparently the kid running had just been dumped by his girlfriend and was running to the window at the end of the hall to jump out and kill himself. Luckily MR. B said that he grabbed him by the belt as he had one leg already out of the window. He yanked him back and took him to the office where the paramedics took him to the hospital for some reason. MR. B said that within a few weeks after the incident the boy tried to kill himself 3 separate times before finally giving up and moving on. He came to school the next day and thanked MR. B for saving his life. I know the kid and he seems happier now. He'll never forget what MR. B did for him. Worked IT in a school for a while. When I joined they were almost done dealing with the aftermath of the old head of music who had essentially been fired for being shit, bullying other staff and getting away with as little as possible. She also signed off on long-term sick leave but still gave private singing lessons to school students, against the rules. She had and still has a bit of a reputation in some circles. But she was very good at making friends and getting people on her side. They eventually managed to get rid of her after it emerged that she'd been fiddling coursework results. But she decided to take the school to court for unfair dismissal. I had no idea how much the students knew when I was there. But it kinda went without saying that you don't discuss it with them. A chronic illness that made me nauseous pretty much all the time and occasionally very dizzy. I generally hid it really well while teaching and my co-workers were able to help me out when things got really bad. I'm no longer teaching. It was always a temporary thing, and doing better now, but I still don't know how I made it through that year as well as I did. One of the Italian teachers that I had in HS got fired. When she didn't come to class, a teacher covering for her said she was sick and going to be out for the rest of the school year. Then when we got a preeminent sub, there was a different excuse. I found out from my sister, who found out from one of her really good friends who keeps in touch with one of the other foreign language teachers. The Italian teacher used fundraised money to fly an Italian exchange student from Italy all the way to where we are because 2 of the students fell in love during the exchanges. The 9th of November 2001, freshman year of high school. All teachers were instructed not to tell any students what happened. My English teacher thought it was really FK'd up and sat us all down and explained everything to us. Surreal moment. That is way FK'd up. I think we spent the day going from class to class watching CNN. I remember sitting on a desk in my first period social studies class watching them replay the planes hitting. They didn't try to hide it at all. And I think by midday they told us that there were people in the library that we could talk to if we needed to.